Hello and welcome to this beginner's tutorial. This tutorial is aimed for people that would like to start using Photoshop in illustration and concept art. And what I'll be explaining here is just a couple of things that makes my Photoshop use more efficient. And that's something you will start learning with time. However, there's several shortcuts and things I've learned that are helping me using Photoshop quicker. My general setup is I usually work on two screens. First screen, which is on Cintiq, is my drawing screen, and the second screen that I have on the side, which you can't see in this video, is where I put all my references and maybe if I'm bored and I don't want to have, silence, I'll put some films there and watch them while I'm painting. Um, and sometimes I'll also use it for Navigator, which is this little window here that allows you to see the whole image as a preview. So for instance, let's switch to a photo that I took some time ago. We can work on the photo here, zoom in and whatnot, and be zoomed in. And this little window here, the red sort of square, will show you where you're currently zoomed in, and it'll give you a good overview of your entire image. So sometimes when you're working on the details and you're kind of like painting, let's say I will be just painting on top of a photo, doesn't matter if I'm just like trying to get those rocks a little bit more natural and whatnot, just focusing on the detail. You can see it updating here, and it's just kind of saving you time because you can just look away to the other screen and you'll see what's going on. We don't want to do any changes here, but basically I would use that a few times. I don't use histogram actually. I just keep it on the other side. I'll close it for now. Another window that I also like to have open in Photoshop is a color window, and I would be when you move into Photoshop, you can open the window from the window view, and then you can move it around and add to your like sort of docks. And I would like to dock it here above history, layer, and channels. So I'll have it here, and I can now color pick whichever color I want, and it's gonna be much easier to find the right color. So that's that. There's three other windows that I have been using quite a lot, which is layers, which is pretty obvious. You want to have full control over your layers in Photoshop. History is what I'll be if I want to take a few quick steps back, and I don't want to just do, Control Alt and Z, which is a shortcut that I should probably put in here. Control plus Alt plus Z, which is step undo, I believe. And if you press Control Alt and Y, it will be a step redo. Basically, if you say paint something and you're not happy with it, you just press Control and Z and it disappears. But if you make one line, second line, one more, and one more here, and whatever, and you just kind of destroyed everything. And if you just press Control Z, you're only kind of flipping back and forth. You only undoing your last action. So if you undo here, then if you press Control Z once, you're actually undoing your undo action. So it kind of comes back. So in order to undo steps by steps, then you press Control Alt and Z, and then you can, remove all those things that you just done. But also, like, you're not sure, maybe some things you've painted are good, so you will just, you can control it by clicking on those layers here. It's almost like history layers, and you can, have a full control over that. So I like to have it docked here, and you can open it by clicking Window, History, and you'll find it there. So if, by instance, oh, we kind of moved it away and closed, like, oh, it's disappeared, what are we gonna do? Just click here, open it up, drag it in, so you'll see it. You can dock it, and then just dock it, and then if you dock it, then you can move it here around. It's pretty easy. That's how Photoshop works right now, and it's pretty simple. One thing about history that I use a lot actually is, let's say I'm just doing really quick stuff here, so I'll maybe open a file, make it 1500 on 900 or 800, doesn't matter, and then I will use, let's say, this brush, and I'm just make it smaller. And I also have caps lock. Caps lock, what it does is, whatever the size of the brush you have, it will be only a dot, but if you disable it, you can actually see the preview of the brush. So let's say I'll be actually using this here, and I'll be just maybe painting some kind of environment here, like that. Maybe some kind of, you know, structures there in the background, and I'm pressing right now X, which allows me to control those two squares here. Those are two different colors. If you click here, you'll have your foreground color. If you click here, you will have your background color. It's important to know what the background color is. I'll explain a little later. So I'll be flipping those colors by pressing X, so that in that way, if I paint and then press X, I can, you know, paint in the background color and do some, you know, adjustments like that. So maybe paint some cloud here. So we have our little cityscape background stuff. And basically what I would be doing here is I'll be pressing X to change foreground and background. Another thing that I'm using, which I didn't write here, is to change the brush size. Let's press T for the text. I'm using bracket keystrokes. So left bracket will be minus size of a brush, and then right bracket will be plus size, whoops, of a brush. And you will see if I press B for brush, I'll go back to my painting, or this shitty thing that I'm doing here. You don't want to look at. It looks really bad. But anyways, I'm just kind of showing you how I use Photoshop. It doesn't have to be pretty for now. So if I want to increase the size of my brush, then I'll press right bracket, and you can see the size of the brush is increasing that way. And if I want to decrease the size of a brush, I'll press the left bracket, and then the size of the brush is changing to something smaller. So I use that because my right hand is on the screen on the tablet, and my left hand is on the keyboard. And I like to do it with that setup because you have full control over keyboard, and if you use your keyboard a lot, then you can have you will have your much more options to control what you're doing in Photoshop. Whereas if you would be using buttons on your Cintiq or buttons on your tablet, then you have only this amount of buttons you can use, and you will find yourself more limited, and then looking for your options here, which is really an inefficient way of working, where you have to kind of look for your thing you want to do, and like I want to, you know, change the size of a brush, so you have to click here and then change the size here. It's like 2 clicks of doing that, whereas you just press left bracket, right bracket, and you're controlling the size that way. Actually, the new addition in Photoshop is in Photoshop CC 2014. If you press Alt and then right click your pen, you can actually Alt and right click, and then you can change the size. But see, what happens is that you can increase the size nicely, but when you want to decrease, it's not so intuitive anymore. So for changing the brush to something big real quick, that's the easy way. Bam, we done it. But for changing it back to like a precise size that you want to use, it's not that good anymore. So I prefer using brackets because I got used to that and I have full control of what I'm doing. And maybe it's gonna take a slightly more time to get the right size, but you know, at least I'm not, you know, I'm not searching for it where that would be like, I want to have 12 and like try doing that here. It's 10, 13, I can't really get it. So I rather just, you know, press 10 and we're done, or 12. Actually, it increases by 5. So, but that's fine. If I want to zoom in maybe, and then I can, you know, put 12 here if I really need 12. It's easier to kind of use brackets for me anyways, so I'll be using that. So that's about brushes and how I use brushes efficiently, or how I use those keystrokes. One thing about history though is, let's say we have all those things we've done here, and you can see I'm keeping a lot of those undos. What you can do to control that is if you go to Edit, Preferences, General, and in Performance, I believe, you have the history states. And I like to keep it around 90. Depending on how fast your machine is, you can keep it more or less. On memory usage, 70% or 60% is pretty good mark. I don't like to go over that because I'll be using different programs as well, and I don't want to have Photoshop to take most of the memory. I want to keep some memory free because Photoshop likes to escalate the memory real fast. And I'll use as much as it can. So that's for controlling how much history you have. And then you'll notice that you have this little window here which says your name file. And what happens is if you press any of those two buttons, you can create sort of stances of where you're at, and then you go back to that stance real quick. So for instance, if I press this, which is snapshot, you'll see I have my first snapshot here, and then I have my opening file here. And when I work on bigger files, I like to do that a lot because let's say I did this and I want to try something else real quick. So I'll start, you know, painting and then create those different elements here. And once I'll be doing that, because I'm painting on one layer and I'm kind of overriding what have already been done. So I don't even know what I'm painting here. It's some kind of orbs or city or whatever. But anyways, so I have this kind of weird sketch here, and I want to, you know, compare what this new thing looks like compared to the old thing. So I'll just press snapshot again, and you'll see I have two snapshots, and I can just switch back and forth. And if you're doing small changes and you're not sure if the changes are okay, or you want to have different, you know, states of your file, then just, you know, keep doing those snapshots, and then you will have, you know, in one file you can have few sketches. One thing to remember, however, is if you save your file and you close it and open it up, this will disappear. So bear that in mind. So if you're doing quick work, this is great. if you're working on large files and you're about to do some changes, this is great too. But if you know you have to save and reopen, then save it in different files. So that is that. That's how I use history channel. Now there is channels here as well, which is RGB, red, green, and blue. And the way I use it is, for instance, I would like to select only areas that are blue in this image, and to make things way easier for me is just see which channel will allow me to do that real quick. And the way you want to look at channels is, what they are showing you is your color, the blue color here, will be aiming towards white. So anywhere there is more blue color, it will become brighter. And everything else will kind of keep the same value as it had before. So our greens and reds and blue, the yellows that we have on the rock will actually be, still having the same value, but they're just going to be grayscale. But any blue color that we have in this picture will actually become white. And we only want to select blue colors, right? So what I like to do is I'll duplicate the channel. I'll create a copy. Okay. Now I'll select this and deselect this, so only make this new copy that I made visible. And you can see there's shortcuts for selecting different channels, which is Control, say 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and then you have those selections. I don't use the shortcuts. I rather click because it's quicker, because it's pretty awkward to put hands on your keyboard in that way to press Control 6, especially once you're gonna have more of those. And then what I like to do is I'll use this shortcut here, which is adjustment levels, and I'll Control L to bring my adjustment levels window. And what I'll be doing is I'll be changing the value structure here. So I want it to be more contrasty, and I want the blues to be white and my everything else to be dark or as close to black as possible. So I'll just do exactly that. I'm turning it all the way down here and then just a little bit up in here, so I get nice controlled sharp line here. And granted, this is not gonna work perfectly, but what I need to do next is I'll use my lasso polygon tool, which is L, which is standard L, and then I'll make a selection like that. And then remember when we were talking about the background color, I want to switch it to background, which is X, or pressing those two arrows. And then once we do that, Control Backspace will fill your selection with the background color. So if it was white and I'll do Control Backspace, then it's going to be white. Let's Control Z to undo. And I want to deselect, so I'll press M for a marquee tool and just press anywhere on the canvas to deselect. So now I have this selection, and why I'm doing this and why I'm using channels and why it's here, for a very simple reason. Now if I press Control and hold Control, you can see my cursor is changing and it's adding a little marquee on top of it, and I press the layer. You see that I've made a selection of everything that is white on this layer. So now let's press this layer, or Control 2, and I'm maintaining this selection, and I can go to layers, and let's say I want the selection, I want the mountain to be a new layer, and then keep the background sky on the separate layer. So I'll do inverse selection, and then I'll press Control and J. Let's type it down here. Control plus J, which is duplicate selection. To new layer. All right, and now you see if I move this, or if I disable that layer, I pretty much have my sky on a separate layer, and that way you can replace sky real easy. For instance, let's take this photo here and copy and then paste it in. And let's just move it around and scale it down. I'll press Shift to have uniform scaling, and we can just quickly replace our background that way. There we go. So all of a sudden we have totally new sky here, and it's totally different, and it took us literally a minute to do that. And to have even more control, because you see there is a little outline that's happening here, which is coming from having those little pixels that are semi-transparent or semi-blue, and because we're increasing contrast, they're kind of like staying here. What I like to do is I'll control and click my new layer to make the selection exactly the same way as we were doing this here, and then I'll press M for Marquee tool, and then I'll press arrow keys and kind of move the selection. So I'll press arrow key and move selection towards left, and I'll do it only twice. So 1 click, 2 clicks. Actually, 1 click should be enough. And what I want to do is select inverse and then delete. Oops, not that layer here. And now you see we got rid of that white edge. And that's the perfect, simplest way to get a clean edge by using channels, marquee tool to nudge your selection, and then replacing your sky. And the last thing I wanted to talk about is, well, we're kind of gonna go through all of those, but the match color, which is basically, let's say we want to change the color of the sky. And what we want to do is I'll press Control M by having my sky selected, and I'll choose my, let's see, it's 3750, which is this file, which is source file. So we want to choose the source file on which we're working, and then we have all the layers we have here. So if I choose layer 1, it will match color to this layer here. If I choose layer 2, it's matching color to exactly the same layer that we have already selected, so that doesn't do anything. And then 3, it will match color to what we have there. And you see the results are pretty ugly. So what I want to do is I'll make a selection of this, control click, select inverse, and then duplicate my sky layer. So if you see, it's only the sky here. And what I want to do is I'll select this, control M, same source file, and then I'll use the new layer. And you'll see that we have, all of a sudden, we have the blue color here. But I want to see how it works with the new foreground. So control M again, bam, and it was this. So it's a little bit too bright. And now what the match color does, we can have more control over image options, so we can make it darker if we want. We can decrease the color saturation and kind of control it better that way. And we can actually fade and make it so that we're actually not doing any work with it, like not changing any color. So I'll show you with, if I put those values to oops, color intensity should be 800, and then this should be 0, or wait, 800 too. To keep the original colors. Fade to 100 means that we're doing nothing. Fade to 50 is that we're matching color by 50%, and fade to 0 means we're matching the color 100%. And then those controls that are here are actually above this here. So if we make 50% here and we're only matching 50% of the color, but we do changes like color intensity 1, it will affect your entire match color no matter how much fade you're gonna have. So this kind of works on top. And same goes to luminance. If I make it 1, it's gonna be extremely dark. If I make it 200, it's gonna be brighter, but it doesn't matter. It's gonna affect both those layers underneath as well. So I want to do 50% fade, about 70% color intensity and maybe 58 color brightness, or maybe color intensity to like 50%, fade to 25. Just kind of eyeballing what feels good. And you see, we kind of matched color to the background. If I control Z, you will see the color change. And we're closer to what we already had there in terms of colors, but we have a different sky. So that was pretty easy way of working here. All right, so we went through brush. Obviously, it's B. Then if you right click, you can choose your brushes. If you press F5, you'll bring your brushes options, which is totally different tutorial that I want to make later on. R, which is smudge tool, is what I use often. There are three tools that I use the most, which is when I paint, I will do my brush, which is B, and I'll brush. I'll use eraser tool, which is E, and then I can erase. And I can choose different brushes for eraser too. And then I'll press R for smudge, and then I'll smudge with whatever I have here. And I can use different brushes here too. So for instance, I can use that one, or I can control those, whatever I want. However I want to control it, I can control it. So brush, erase, smudge. Oops, smudge. And that's the way I would be working with the brushes. And you just press B, E, and R. And those three controls are pretty close to each other and easy to access. N, which goes for blur. I rarely use it, but it's helpful for small adjustments to your edges and whatnot. It's gonna be less apparent if you use it on larger files, so I don't use it that often. V, which is move tool. Let's say we have new layer and we paint something and we erase. If I press V, by default it's gonna look like this, and then if you click and move, it will allow you to move it around. Now what I like to do is to have show transform controls, which is here, and that way if I want to scale it, I just press here and I can scale it. If you don't have those controls, then there is nothing to press and you cannot control it. You have to make another click, select that layer, and then I don't even know how to do it. So I have it on, then I can make transformations. Actually, you would have to go to layer, think transformations, so somewhere here. See, I don't even know. I've been using it all the time, show transform controls, and I just don't know how to not use it, and it's just so handy because you just right click and then you can warp and you have full control over your layer. And let's say for whatever reason you hate those bounding boxes and you want to freely move around with it without having those obstructing your view, and it sometimes happens, it's gonna happen. So what I do here is just I press Control H, which if you go to view, you will see extras, Control H, and it's toggling extras, which means toggling your bounding, transform controls. But also, if by any chance you will have the ruler on, which is Control R, and you move this to kind of like, I want to remember that this layer was somewhere here, and you're creating those kind of lines that help you, and you're moving things around, and then but it's just kind of affecting, like, I don't want to see it. Control H, you hide it, and you can move things around. And then you want to bring it back, Control H again. So it's pretty simple and very handy, and you will find using that a lot too. Quick selection tool. That's gonna be pretty good to explain. Let's go back here, and we just press W, and you have two options here. If you hold and click and hold the click, you'll see Magic Wand tool and Quick Selection tool. Let's select that, and what it does is it will make a selection based on the contrast of your image. So let's just make a history snapshot for all that we did here, and then let's go back to our original file. And let's say we want to do the same operation. We want to isolate the background layer. So I'll just kind of paint on top like this. And you see, in a matter of a second, I made this selection. And then I can, you'll see that there's a little bit of that selection that went kind of over because there's the value contrast is really low here. So if you press Alt, you'll see that there's a little minus happening there. So I'll make it smaller, press Alt, and then when you draw, you're actually deselecting the same way. So for instance, I can deselect like this, and you know, it's gonna work both ways. So by default, it's plus, which is selection, and by holding Alt, you can deselect. And then press M, right-click, inverse selection, Control J for making new layer, and we have our stuff on the new layer. It works perfectly. Same stuff. So that's quick selection, and then there's also something like Magic Wand. And the way it works is it will have a tolerance. So the lower the tolerance, the less value and hue changes it will tolerate. So if I click here, I'm only selecting, you see, 1 or 2 pixels, but if I make tolerance 55 or 44, for instance, and I press again, you see the selection is much bigger. Because all of a sudden I have bigger tolerance to how many pixels will be selected based on the hue and values. So I'll use that a lot to click to deselect, and or you can just if you have your selection, right click, deselect. Either way, you can do that. And then the last thing here is if you right click, you have color range. And I use it sometimes, especially for creating like special masks or whatever. The way it works, it's using your eyedropper to select a color, and then you can change the fuzziness. And it works like your magic wand. It works exactly like your magic wand and tolerance, although it will just allow you to see what actually you will select here in this little preview window. So we're choosing tolerance 14. You see the selection is going to be pretty low. Now you choose 100, and then you're almost selecting an entire mountain. And it's affecting the entire image, by the way. Whereas your magic wand is just affecting only this one area. So that's useful, and I use that quite a few times too. Then next one is healing tool, which is J. And you have few options here. I normally only use healing brush tool. And the way it works is you alt click to eyedrop something, like let's say here, and we want to paint more of that mountain here. So boom. And we have our mountain there. Boom. And we have it there. Now, the great thing about this is, let's say I make selection like here and paint on top, and I'm not using soft brush on whatsoever. So in essence, we should be getting those edges here, right? In this new painted stuff. But what it does, it's averaging. It makes it look like their edges are actually averaged together. So it's making it more seamless. So it's a great tool that I use sometimes. Crop tool is the next one. Is when you press C, you have your crop tool selected, and then there's one option that is important. It's delete cropped pixels. Let's say I'll make a duplicate, Control J to duplicate layer and move it outside. And I'll just scale it up. And the way it works here, if I press C, if I press on any corner, you'll see that my canvas is actually outside. There's more outside of the canvas than just inside what you just saw. So because we moved that layer, it actually made the canvas larger on the outside. If you have delete cropped pixels enabled and you you click on the edge to show where you're cropping, and like let's say you recrop to something like this, and then you press enter to accept. Let's press C again to enable, or let's make a selection for a crop, and then press on the corner again. You see the canvas is cropped. There's nothing outside, right? So let's undo, and let's do the same again. But now let's not delete cropped pixels, and let's scale it up or scale it down. If you move your cursor outside, you can see we can actually make a rotation and we can move things around. And then let's press enter. So we have our cropped area, but now if we crop again, you see we actually kept a lot of pixels outside. So this is pretty crucial. If you're working on big files and you're not sure if the framing is correct, never have this on. What it will do is just delete the pixels that you might need later on. And especially when you work for client and client will say like, can I actually make this bigger? And then you need to, you're fucked. You have to paint those areas that you just deleted. So it's good to have that in mind. And what's next? Marquee tool which is M. So you can have your selections which are square or elliptical or single row. So you can make something like this, or elliptical. Oops. Right click. So just marquee tool, pretty straightforward. U, which is go for a line tool. I like to have it on pixels. By default, it's shape. What it does, if you make a line, it will create a shape, will have its own bounding box, and it'll be your new layer. And I hate, like, as much as nice, you can control it nicely here. It'll keep if you scale it up, it'll keep the resolution nicely, which is great, but it's just a headache because then you have to deal with the new layer and you cannot just kind of like use it. So what I like to do is when I use my line tool, I will make it so that it's pixels, and then it's just, painting pixels on top of your layer, and I'll use it that way. What else? Brush sizes were already discussed. Flip horizontal, flip vertical. I use it a lot, and it's Control-Shift-Alt-Q. It's actually not that. It's Control-Alt-Q. That's what I made it. So we should probably delete that here. My fault. Control-Q and Control-A. And the way I'm using it is when I'm making a composition and I'm like working on it here, I'll make my selections and I'll do my cloning here. So I'm doing a lot of those things, and I want to check if the composition is correct. Like, I'm not sure if whatever I've just done will actually work as a composition. So I'm just doing a little paint like that and whatnot, and then this composition works right or not. Control-Alt-Q, and then you can see how it looks flipped. The reason is that when you look at your image for way too long, all of a sudden everything starts to kind of blur together, and you'll lose control over how well your composition works in your image. So I would use it a lot, and you should use it too, because it's the best way to control your image. What else we have here? Step, undo, adjustments, resize, Control-Shift-R. I just made it so I can resize image. Duplicate, selection to new layer we discussed, and this as well. So that's pretty much it. That's the most essential parts of the Photoshop that I'll be using. If you wish to have those shortcuts, all you have to do is go edit, keyboard shortcuts, and those shortcuts we have here are under not application menu but tools, and you can just control which tools will react to your keyboard strokes, and then application menu will allow you to do those controls here. So if you go image, you'll see that we have our match color, which is Control-M, and then we'll see that you have flip canvas horizontally and vertically, which is those which I've shown you. And then what I was having here before is Control Shift Alt and Q, and Control Shift Alt and A, which is 90 degree clockwise and 90 degree counterclockwise. And this goes for rotation, so I can rotate my image around. That's useful when you're importing your photos and they are in the wrong, they're just rotated for some reason. Maybe we're holding camera and it doesn't have this feature where it will automatically rotate your photos. So that will be one of the ways of using it. And I found it using it a few times, not too crucial. So I made it more complicated in terms of the shortcut, but it's still kind of useful and whatnot. So here's a great example how to use your history snapshots, by the way. I made some improvements to my photo and made the mountain to seem bigger than it is. I'll make a snapshot, and then I really like the sky that I had on this the other snapshot, so this one. So I'll go here, Control A for selecting the entire canvas, Control C to copy. Then I'll go to history, go to my second snapshot, select the background layer, and Control V. And there we go. We have our new sky pasted in. So you have full control over your files if you work with snapshots, and it's great. And then if you like to have iteration in the separate file, you can just create new document from current state. Boom, and we have exactly same document, exactly same layers and everything. And all you're gonna lose though is your snapshot history and your channels that you just created. They're only gonna be here. Well, I actually don't have them here, but you see I have the snapshot history here. I don't have it here anymore. Because the way it works is it will start with, when you open new file, it will clear everything up and start from zero. So we can close that, but we have this, and that's it. That's how I would be using Photoshop. It's pretty simple and straightforward, and there'll be more tricks and tips coming in later on. A few more very basic tutorials that will improve your workflow. If you have any suggestions on anything else that you would like to see, just feel free to go to my Facebook, which is, I believe, facebook.com, something like this. And then also for any other tutorials, you can just find them on gumroad.com, and the same, Maciej Kuchara. So thanks for watching and thanks for enjoying it, and then I'll hopefully see you, or you will hopefully hear me soon with the new stuff. Thanks.